Airport's CEO describes this as a small city. She says up to 26,000 people work here. The terminal itself is the biggest single building in British Columbia. YVR had been aiming to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Now they say they've moved that target to 2030, just 9 years away.
It's the right thing to do from a community point of view, from our contribution to the economy, to support local businesses to work with us who are working towards solutions either in clean tech or lowering their own footprint.
The road to net zero includes things like switching many of YVR's vehicles to electric and more efficiently heating and cooling the terminal. But Vrooman concedes the airport is only a small part of the carbon footprint of air travel. It's those jets loaded with passengers and cargo crossing oceans and continents that generate the bulk of the emissions. So how do we balance our climate concerns with a desire to fly? In a way, COP26 is an illustration of the dilemma, drawing delegates from around the world. So we asked two environmentalists with two different views of traveling to conferences. Zipporah Berman is in Glasgow now. She chairs what's called the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and was invited to COP26 by the organizers. I spoke to her before she left Vancouver.
It was a big struggle for me because right now there's no question that aviation is pretty much anyone's biggest personal carbon footprint. If you take one flight, to offset it, you would have to become vegetarian for 4 years. And so I thought long and hard about it. My family and I have restricted personal travel now for over a decade because of our concerns about climate change. But this Conference of the Parties that's starting in Glasgow next week is a critical moment in human history. We need to hold our governments to account. I think it's really important that we have representatives of civil society there, that we watchdog the process, that we encourage them to be as ambitious as possible. And then we tell the world what's happening inside those rooms.
Erica Frank has a different view. The UBC professor says even taking the stairs to our interview instead of the elevator is part of her commitment to use less energy. Her approach to air travel?
The thing that's special about flying is that in just a few hours you can eliminate anything that you tried to do for the last years in terms of being kind to the environment. The amount of damage that can be done in a few hours, based on the data, and only based on the data, I went from a life of taking an airplane trip every month or so for work, and often also for pleasure, to one where I do so usually once a year or so. And it was because the pleasure and the professional gain that I might have gotten from doing that, it wasn't fair. There were too many people. If we're serious about calling this a climate emergency, we have to say, I'm going to make a little bit of personal sacrifice.
So just to tell you a little bit about the MPH program.
A few days before our interview, Frank spoke to a group in the U.S. by video link, and she wishes COP26 delegates would do the same.
I have friends who are more serious about this, more virtuous than me about this, and who don't travel by air anymore and severely restrict their travel. But I restrict it some. I try to look for alternatives, and I try to encourage others to do the same, because it's the single most important thing that the 11% of the world who flies can do to reduce our personal carbon footprint.
As you heard, Berman agrees we should try to reduce our flights, but as a veteran of COP conferences, she says it's important to meet face to face.
If you do it on Zoom, you don't actually build trust and personal relationships, and these issues are hard. And a lot of the meetings happen behind closed doors, so it's about access. When you go to a conference of the parties, it's shocking how much access you have, because there are all the ministers just walking in the halls. There are some of the world's leading experts, economists and scientists, and everyone's together in one building. And so more gets done in that 2-week period than that gets done in the year in between. And if you're not there, then you miss out on a lot of those conversations, and you can't influence those conversations. And what happens when the negotiations and the discussions go online is that participation is very limited, and often critical voices are just left out.
As for those of us who are flying for other reasons, the aviation industry is hoping changes in technology will, over time, reduce air travel's carbon cost.
You know, Canada is a great country in so many ways. We're blessed by big geography and small population. So we need to fly in order to create the social and the economic connections, in order to move goods for trade. We need a healthy aviation sector. So I would like us to get to a place where we don't see aviation as the enemy, we see carbon. And so how do we decarbonize aviation so that there's not that same kind of trade-off? Because we need to fly, given our geography and given the size of our population. So that's why we're doing what we're doing.